Thanks for joining me for Naturally Crafty. My name is Caitlyn Niehus. I am the Summer Naturalist here at Dorothy Pico Nature Center. I'll be teaching you how to make clay impressions for fossils today, and then teaching you a little bit about how fossils are created. Please remember to like and subscribe to our channel to see all kinds of interesting and educational content. The first thing we're going to do is put together the ingredients to make the clay to imprint with fossils. So I have a recipe attached to the link to this craft that you can use to create your own. I have this recipe because I don't need as much clay because I'm only going to be making one small project to show you. But you're going to take 2 cups of baking soda and add that in. And you should have 1 cup of cornstarch, and you're going to add that in. Once you've put those 2 ingredients in, you can also add 5/4 or 1 cup and 1/4 cup of water. So with this formula, then you're going to stir it all up together, and then you're going to boil it for 10 to 15 minutes. So I'll go do that and I'll bring it back. So this is what it looks like after it has been cooked on medium heat for about 10 to 15 minutes. So it's got a nice kind of doughy texture. I can poke it, can squish it. It's a little hot right now, so I'm gonna go let it cool down. I might set it in the fridge for just a little bit, and then I will show you some of the options and what you can do. Okay, so now we have our lump of clay from the pan. It's cooled down enough, and it's still fairly moist, so it's workable, can easily shape it. If you are not ready to shape it or want to continue to use this as time goes by, you can wrap it in saran wrap or put it in a plastic container, and it will stay moist and able to be worked on for another 2 weeks. So 2 more weeks, and then this unfortunately is going to dry out and you could make another batch. So it's basically just another natural form or homemade Play-Doh that will dry into a nice clay format. As you can see at the top of my board, I have multiple options for things that I could imprint onto my dough and leave a mark on. So for my first one, I'm just going to leave it kind of flat like a plate, and then I'm going to press my things into it. But if I wanted to, I could also take a paper plate bowl or some other bowl, and I could put it into that form and let it dry, and it would take that shape, and I'll show you that later as well. But if I just want a flat piece of dough so that I can see my fossil plainly like it's a plate, I can kind of shape that into whatever form I want, and then I can take multiple objects and press them in to leave an impression behind in my clay. So I have several options. We have leaves, so if I press that in there and let it sit for a little bit, or I have some shells, and I'm going to take that ridged side for that pattern and press it into my dough. And I have a couple different shells, so I'll show you what they look like. My spindly one. And then I also have this plastic grasshopper, and he's gonna make a cool imprint. But if you have other kinds of plastic toys or things that you would want to put in here, like plastic dinosaurs, that would also be a great option, as it makes a really neat and unique imprint in the clay. And so I would let that sit for just a little bit, and then I can remove them. And they'll leave a nice neat imprint that I will zoom in on to show you. So you can see here, you can see the veining on the leaf right there. My different shells left different patterns, and you can see the ribbing on there of the different patterns. And then my grasshopper print left very unique marks in my clay. And for this turn, I'm going to try to roll it out with a rolling pin to get a really thin, even texture on this, so that I can place it within a bowl so that it takes that shape. And I'm going to take a little bowl and very slowly peel this up. As it is, it likes to crackle a little bit on me. So but I've got my nice thin sheets, so I'll just take those and I'll piece them together. Because my goal isn't to make like a waterproof bowl or anything like that. It's just kind of to create a bowl shape and see how that works out. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Now that I have the approximate bowl shape I want, and I might go around and trim and make this more of a clean edge, I'm going to take different parts that I appreciated and I'm going to press them in to create some different imprints. And they do tend to turn out a little bit better with fresh leaves, but I'm just going to keep reusing a couple just for an example. And if you wanted to go back once this is dried and kind of give it like a little bit of a watercolor paint, that might sink into these impressions really beautifully to show those colors. I actually changed my mind, and I wasn't happy that the bowl looked a little cracked, so I got my fingers a little bit wet and I just kind of slid around the inside to make it a very smooth kind of surface. And then to kind of give you a better image of what it would look like with different leaves, I went out and collected a few more, and I'm just going to leave these on here until they dry so that I have a better imprint and a stronger imprint on my bowl. So this is what it's going to look like. And I just took actually a spoon and I just kind of like slid it around the top, and then I covered that. I just smoothed that with some water on my finger as well. So I'm going to leave this to dry, and this will be what you guys see later. So now that you've gotten to make your own fossils through the clay imprint, I'm going to talk a little bit about real fossils. And we're really very fortunate that the Nature Center actually has a variety of fossils within their collection. So I'm going to be sharing some real-life examples from the Dorothy Pico Nature Center's reserve. But first, fossils are formed over an incredibly long time, and only under specific circumstances. The most common fossils are from aquatic species and things, which you can see I have examples here. So things that live in the water, like corals, clams, and snails. So these are some of the marine species we have at the Nature Center, and they're very, very interesting. So this is a previous shell. This is an example of coral, and I'll show you a little bit more closely. So you can actually see the different stems of the coral along it. And this is all solid rock. So you can see some of the outside where the tubers open, and this is the inner workings of the coral. It's like a sliced open rock. And then this is what is called fossiliferous limestone. So it has tons and tons of shell specimens within the rock. And this special specimen right here is the fossil of a trilobite. So that is from the Devonian era of fossils in time. And this is actually a predecessor to crustaceans, millipedes, and other insects. So it's actually an ocean kind of creature. And all of these are available in specimens taken from Iowa, because Iowa once was underneath ocean waters and marine waters. So we have a lot of limestone deposits and very sandy composite rocks here in Iowa, because that is from our geologic past. So I'm going to also explain 5 different ways that fossils can form. And the first 2 ways I'm going to explain are permineralization and natural casts. Usually, for fossils to form, the animal needs to be buried before it completely decomposes or is eaten by other animals, which most typically happens near water because the silt or mud covers the animal. This is why fossils of land animals are very rare, as the conditions for the fossils to form are precise. Once buried, the fossil can undergo permineralization or become a natural cast. In permineralization, minerals in the water underground fill the cells in empty spaces in a fossil, and they create rocks the shape of the bones, teeth, shells, or wood. There's also some other things. So you can see right here, this is a fossilized mushroom. We have shell fossils and fossilized trees here at the Nature Center. So some of the collection I've pulled out to show you today, this is a giant shell from before, and this is the fossiliferous limestone. So this is kind of where the rock took shape around it, and it maintained the structure of the shells as well. And it probably incorporated a lot of rock. So if you look on the inside of the shell, it's been completely filled with other kinds of rocks. This is an example of fossilized wood. So it has a very unique kind of reddish color, and then it still maintains the structural identity of the bark on the outside. We've already seen this is the fossilized mushroom. It's actually one of our more delicate pieces, and it's maintained its structure as well. Natural casts are when all of the bone and body parts are washed away, but the minerals in the water replace them and create a mold, recreating the original shape. It happens commonly in shells, and I believe that this is the best representation for our turtle fossil at the Nature Center. You can see the scutes and the underside of the shell, as well as the inside where the turtle would be. And this specimen came from the Badlands in South Dakota. So this is part of his shell. And you can tell this is mostly a rock that formed in the place of where it would have been. So this is part of his shell on the outside. That's what's called the scute. This is probably the lining of his bone. So this is his spine, and then the ribs are along here. And then you can see the underside of his shell is also intact with that bottom. And then all of this would have been where his body may have been. So this is an incredibly fascinating fossil that we have here at the Nature Center. If an animal were to leave a footprint, or if someone found leaf imprints or something else that indicates a presence of an organism that's long gone, it would be called a trace fossil. So these are two examples of trace fossils that we have at the Nature Center. But there are collections of trace fossils all over the world that help us know more about animals and what they have been doing and where they've been. So this is also another piece from the collection that's from the Badlands of South Dakota. So this is the pelvic bone from a mammal long ago, and this dent within it is from a saber-toothed cat that bit into it when it was eating, and it left that imprint. And so it's been completely fossilized. You can still see where the marrow would have been, and that is one of our examples. And this example, believe it or not, is from rain hitting the sand. So it's a bunch of different places where the water droplets had been, and then it became covered, and it maintained itself in this fossilized format. Unfortunately, the last two forms that fossils can be in are not available at the Nature Center. So I will overlay pictures and I'll explain the two different forms as you get to see examples of those kinds of fossilization. First, you're going to see images of amberized fossils. So small creatures like bugs, lizards, frogs, or other small organisms, even pollen, can get stuck in tree sap. And then as that tree is buried, the resin will harden into amber. And so these small animals and insects can be trapped inside the amber and serve as a fossil record. Additionally, the other form of fossil that can be found is a completely preserved specimen. So this is when something would become trapped in ice, in a peat bog, or in volcanic ash. So if you've ever heard about Pompeii and the entire city that was preserved, that's because it was instantly preserved under a layer of volcanic ash. You may have also heard of mammoths or other creatures being found frozen in ice in the Arctic. And then peat bogs, it's like somebody went into this swamp area and it's very loose sediment and lots of layers of decaying organic material, so from plants, and it forms a sort of quicksand in areas. So an animal that got sucked in and their whole body was preserved. And then between that, for all three of those, if the entire body is covered before it's been preyed on or anything like that, in those circumstances, the tissue, bones, fur, or feathers, or any kind of organic material would be preserved in those instances. So it's very convenient to find specimens from these locations because we learn so much more that we have to guess at in other forms of fossils.